And welcome into the Gator Bytes podcast, 1010XL.com, the Florida Gator, 1010XL Facebook page, and really all the good 1010XL social media platforms. As always, the Gator Bytes podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. For the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for any orthopedic injury or concern. You can log on to their website by going to se-ortho.com. And we always appreciate the good folks at Southeast Orthopedic Specialist. He is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker Ryan Green, and we were going to break down the review of the cocktail party. We were going to preview Texas, and then just a huge football Gator related story broke yesterday where Billy Napier gets the vote of confidence, and it looks like AD Scott Strickland has made the decision that Billy Napier will be back for at least the 2025 season. I got a lot of thoughts on it, Graham. I know you do as well, but certainly a seismic shift from what we thought was going to happen to what actually appears is going to happen moving forward.
Well, a seismic shift from what we thought was going to happen when? Like a month ago? Because I think
I
you
mean,
and I probably,
after A&M, I think
yeah,
if
yeah,
everybody
I
wanted
would
him
agree there.
fired the Sunday after that.
Yeah, because I think you and I, especially over the last couple of weeks, were leaning that he's getting next year, barring falling on their face again.
Right.
Um, so I believe Hack and Dylan Denmark and I talked about this yesterday. I believe that the news dropped yesterday. I believe the announcement dropped yesterday. I believe the decision to keep him behind closed doors was probably made weeks ago. What say you?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. It was interesting, and I'm going to take credit for this because I did it on Tuesday on Hacker After Dark, and I actually retweeted it yesterday before the announcement on Thursday. I was on a Kansas City radio station, and they wanted me on to talk about the Jaguars, but at the very end, they're like, "All right, Billy Napier or Doug Peterson. If one stays and one goes in 2025, who's most likely to stay?" And I completely changed my tone on that. I told them on Tuesday I thought Billy Napier was more likely to stay than Doug Peterson. And obviously, it appears I'm half right about that. I think probably after Kentucky. Look, Florida cannot compete with the big boys right now, but what did we say? You got to win the games you're supposed to win. Florida has won every game this year they were supposed to win.
Well,
Samford, UCF, Mississippi State, and obviously Kentucky. The four teams they've lost to, I believe, are all in the top 10 or 12 in America right now. I mean, they've lost to Miami, A&M, Tennessee, Georgia, and I believe every one of those teams would be in the playoff if the playoff started today.
yeah, and I would actually push back on one thing you actually said is they can't compete with the big boys. I mean, they had Georgia tied with 4 minutes to go. They should have
You're
beaten
right.
Tech. They were
Ver-
stupid.
yeah, verbiage, they can't beat the big boys. You're right. They
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
absolutely
yeah, yeah.
competed with them. You're
That's
right.
fair. And they did get blown out by two of the bigger boys, I would guess you could say, this year in college football, in A&M and Miami. But I think both you and I, and probably most even people that are upset with this decision, would agree that if they were to replay that Miami and A&M game, it would look different today than it did through the first 3 weeks of the season. Hack, here's my thing. I think if you're upset about this announcement being made and this post being made because you don't want him back and you don't think Strickland should bring him back and you think he deserves the axe. Okay, that is fine to be in that camp, and I think that's one part of the conversation to be had. I guess not anymore because he's going to be the coach. So that was one part of the conversation to be had. The other part is, okay, given the fact that that decision has been made, given the fact that, like you and I just said, probably after Kentucky a couple of weeks ago, they decided this guy is the coach in 2025. Given the fact that that decision was already made, was it smart to make this public statement and this public vote of confidence? I say yes, because the Gators are getting killed in recruiting right now. And a lot of people say that's because they're losing. I don't think it's because they're losing. I think it's because Mario Cristobal and Kirby Smart and all the other coaches that they recruit against on a year in year out basis, if you don't think they've been in recruits' living rooms this year, saying why in the world would you go to Florida? You don't know if that guy's going to be the coach next year. You're crazy. Of course they have. So that's been really hurting the Gators in recruiting. So to have this public statement out there, this public vote of confidence for Scott Strickland to get out there in front of it, I mean, not really in front of it, they're kind of behind the eight ball, but at least now try to get out in front of it and say, look, this guy's our coach, he's going nowhere. That should help them in recruiting. How much will remain to be seen. They're not going to turn this into a top 10 class, but can they salvage it into a class in the 20s and the teens? I think there's a chance there. And then you get some talent coming in with that recruiting class, and you would have to imagine this would be the year, if there's ever a year, that they would go really, really hard in the transfer portal, and you take your chances in 2025.
Well, a couple of things. Oh, I think the transfer portal, they might be the most active team in the country. I mean,
Yeah.
they had the money to buy out Napier. You would think a lot of those resources are now going to be used entirely with NIL and the transfer portal. I think
Andy
Florida,
Staples wrote an article about that on three that was really good.
yeah, I think they're going to channel their inner Florida State from a couple of years ago. I think the biggest names in the portal, Florida's going to get their fair share of them. They're going all in the portal. I don't think there's any doubt about that. A couple of things. DJ Lagway, for whatever it's worth, that post came out on social media. Lagway responded very positively to it very soon after that. So this obviously is DJ Lagway's seal of approval. You mentioned why did they announce it now? Well, I have a couple of thoughts there. Number one, maybe backdoor conversations in Oxford, Mississippi led the powers that be in Gainesville to believe that Lane Kiffin wasn't coming. I don't know. I mean, that's a thought, right? Maybe they talked a little bit and they got the vibe that maybe Lane Kiffin wasn't coming. I know Lane Kiffin's daughter, I believe, is a freshman or a sophomore at Ole Miss. I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, but I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. But the timing's interesting. They're also probably going to lose their next couple of games. And I don't think it's going to be Billy Napier's fault. They're going to be playing a third string quarterback. Now, we don't really know Lagway's status, and we'll get to that in a moment, but assuming Lagway doesn't play tomorrow, which I can't imagine he would, I mean, you have a third string quarterback going into Austin, Texas to play the Texas Longhorns. I mean, what is realistic to expect? I don't care who you are. Ohio State, Oregon, Alabama, Georgia, I don't care. Take the top two quarterbacks off of a depth chart. You start your third string guy, you're not going to do very much in today's day and age in college football. That's just reality, man. So I think, if they go out and they lose 45-10 tomorrow, it's going to be a bad look. And I don't expect that to happen. But they probably wanted to beat that to the punch by making the announcement 2 days prior. So I do think there were a lot of factors that go into it. And now, with Napier having the security that he's coming back in 2025, again, I don't rush DJ Lagway back. Why would you? I mean, he got carted off the field last week because he couldn't walk off the field. Now, Napier comes out on Monday and says, well, it's not as bad as we initially thought, and that's great. And maybe he can play against Florida State or maybe he can play against Ole Miss. But why on this planet, if you know you're going to be back, would you put your quarterback out there at 60 or 70% to play against Texas and or LSU in the next couple of weeks? To me, that doesn't make any sense, and you wouldn't do that. So I think they beat a lot of things to the punch by making the announcement when they did.
Yeah, and also early signing day is a little over a month away.
Yeah, you got a month away. It's like December. It's usually around December 7th or 8th.
To me, that's the main thing. That's the main reason that
But
you
again,
gotta.
I don't know how many kids are going to verbal to Florida in the next 24 hours. You know what I mean? I think
Not in
they
the next
wanted to.
24 hours, but within the next month.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
right. That's certainly a
we're
reason.
because they're 51st right now. Okay, which is obviously bad, right? And you can't tell me they're not 51st because of Billy Napier's job status. That's why they're so low, right? The
I'll push back on one thing, and you're right. I mean, I can't argue stats. You're right. I don't know this, but I'd be curious what Mike Norvell and Florida State were the last couple of years in high school recruiting. Because if you bring in Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson and Trey Benson and Jared Verse and Jermaine Johnson and Braden Fisk, obviously it doesn't really matter what you are in high school recruiting, which I think Florida has figured out at this point. I mean, you look at the transfers this year that made a huge impact. And I think they're going to go absolutely all in the portal. So I think you want them to improve in high school recruiting, but if they end up being 28th, I wouldn't lose a lot of sleep over that because I would bet you a lot of matchsticks they're going to be top 5 in the portal this year.
Yeah, especially considering the fact that they got to win now.
Yes.
There's no more, you know, Billy has leaned a lot heavier high school since he's been here, but that's because it's been the long game since he's been here. I believe kind of the flip side of this coin of this announcement is the entire time he's been here, it's been the long game. It's been building something. It's been through the high school, developing guys, getting the young guys ready to play, and blah, blah, blah. Now I think we're turning a page, I believe, in the book of Billy Napier as Florida's head coach. We're at a new chapter now, which is it's time to win now. It is time to be aggressive. It is time to do everything possible to win now. Not 2 years from now, not after guys get in your program and develop, now. You are going to have a second year, 5-star quarterback that, for all intents and purposes, looks to be one of the special ones, one of
And
those guys.
that's going to be a powerful powerful thing when it comes to wide receivers,
Of
tight
course.
ends, running backs in the portal. That will help.
Offensive lineman.
Yeah.
You want to block for the 5-star phenom behind you? Like, if you're a really good offensive lineman and you've been playing for Arizona State or something, I don't know who their quarterback is, but you want to come play for a 5-star that's going to be lighting the world, that for all intents and purposes hopefully is going to be lighting the world on fire. If you're a wide receiver, you want to be playing for a guy that if you're 50 yards down the field and you got half a step, hits you right in the hands, you want to play for that guy? Of course, I totally agree with you. And they're going to have to hit it hard. They're going to have they got it, and I think this is part of the decision to keep him going into next year. Lagway is the number one reason, but beyond just Lagway, this team clearly has a good young nucleus of players. I think with the way they've been playing lately, look, if you're not satisfied with the way Billy has been overall, I totally get it. I think there's a fair argument to be had there. And if your argument is in year 3 they got to be producing better results than that, I don't even necessarily disagree with that. All I'm saying is what they've been showing the last couple of weeks, they clearly have a good young nucleus of guys that you can be excited about going forward, particularly if you match that up with a really good transfer portal class this coming off season. I mean, it's Lagway, of course. Jaden Ball looks like one of the best backs Florida's had in a minute. He reminds me a lot of Dameon Pierce, the way he runs the ball. He's a little bit taller, but build-wise, not but just the way he runs with bad intentions. Hopefully get Eugene Wilson back. That'll be kind of interesting to see what he might do, if he might test the waters of the transfer portal. Who knows with that yet? Aiden Mizell is going to be really good on offense. Like, you really like him. Some other young receivers, like maybe Andy Jeans, who knows? And then on defense, man, these linebackers have figured it out, haven't they?
Hey, dude, I'll
Jack
tell you
Hyburn,
this.
Pup Howard, Shamar James,
Aaron Gates has been
Aaron Gates.
phenomenal. Jaden Robinson, I mean, Castile is only a sophomore, I believe. I mean, there's a lot of youth on that defense, and they're obviously playing a lot better.
So that leads you, that gives you a reason. Again, if people, there's a lot of people that are still upset today and say they should have never made this decision. They should have fired him. They should have moved in a direction. I understand, but you cannot argue that now they at least have a good group of young guys to be excited about. My expectation now, Hack, and I think you kind of alluded to it a minute ago, my expectation is for them to be arguably the most active team in the transfer portal this offseason.
There's no
And
arguably about it. They will absolutely be the most active team in the transfer portal. I have no doubt about that.
and they need to get to a point in the offseason where they get enough portal guys to where you and I are doing Gator Bytes in February or March and saying, man, this roster looks real good now. This roster looks like they can go down to Coral Gables week 1 and beat Miami. This roster looks like they're going to beat Tennessee in the Swamp. This roster looks like the spread against Georgia is going to be relatively close to even, that type of thing. They got to get to that point now. They are, because one side is the vote of confidence from Scott Strickland and saying this guy's my guy, we're not getting rid of him. I believe the other side now it's put up or shut up time.
Today's Gator Bytes podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. Again, se-ortho.com is their website. Every Thursday morning on 1010XL, you can listen to the good Dr. Kevin Murphy of Southeast Orthopedic Specialists on the drill with Jeff and Dan for his weekly analysis of injuries in the world of sports. And again, Southeast Orthopedic Specialists has been with us for years here on the Gator Bytes podcast, and we absolutely appreciate their continued support. Again, se-ortho.com. All right, a couple of things with Billy Napier. And the reaction was swift last week. I have no doubt the reaction in the comments will be swift here on the Gator Bytes podcast. A lot of negativity, I'm sure. I've said this the entire season. If you kill the guy when he's losing, in the interest of fairness, commend him when they're doing things right. They have gotten better. Man, at 1-2 after that beat down by A&M, everybody screaming to the hills to have him fired on that Sunday, 3 games into the season. I'm sure the players, friends, family, acquaintances, oh man, Billy's gone, get out of there, go to the portal. You know, all the different things that these 18, 19, 20-year-old kids are being told by people that they trust. The noise in the system. Graham, it would have been so easy, man, for this thing to just spiral, i.e. Florida State, what's going on in Tallahassee. They could have gone to Starkville and gone through the motions, gotten killed. KJ Jefferson and UCF could have come in there and beat them. Kentucky, who had already beaten them 3 years in a row, could have come in there. I mean, they could have so easily just tucked tail and headed for the hills, and this season would have been an absolute flipping disaster. That did not happen. Say what you will about Billy Napier, all right? And maybe you think I'm grasping at straws in year 3, and maybe you're right. But the reality is, when McElwain was gone, he was gone, right? The team was awful. Mullen, the same thing. You cannot argue. There's one thing that's not arguable, if that's a word. There's one thing you cannot literally argue with us on, that this team is clearly better from where they were in mid-September to where they are now. They are clearly better in basically every aspect of football. Despite last week against the number 2 team in the land, on offense, you didn't have Graham Mertz, DJ Lagway, Trey Wilson, Montrell Johnson. On defense, you didn't have Jason Marshall. I mean, those arguably are the 5 best guys coming into the year for Florida. You could make a legit argument those would be the top 5 guys. They didn't have any of them in the second half last week. And it's 20-20 with 5 minutes to go against what many people think is the best team in college football. And why is that the case? Because Billy Napier and that staff kept this team together and have worked their butts off, man. And again, I know it's all about wins and losses, and I get it, but kill the guy when he's losing, fair enough. Commend the guy with things like that. And for that reason, which was mentioned in Scott Strickland's statement, I think that played a huge factor into why Billy Napier gets 2025.
I think the main reason, Hack, and this is just kind of piggybacking off of what you just said. I think the main reason that I kind of feel the way I do right now, which is that I think I'm kind of on the fence, but I think I lean that this is the right move overall. I think the main reason I feel that way is piggybacking off of what you just said, that the guy finally has some mojo. He's finally seemingly turned it a little bit, or he's not a complete 180. It's not like he's turning around, they're beating everybody they play, but he's finally got a team playing good football. He's finally got a team on Saturdays that Gator fans can get somewhat excited about. He's finally got these guys he's recruited playing well. He's finally got these guys pushing good teams to the brink and then beating not good teams. So finally, for once, you're seeing a little bit of a product show up on the field. So you're going to fire him now?
Yeah.
That he's finally figured it out? I mean, and again, when I say figure it out, I'm not trying to say they're going to go win the national championship next year. I'm not saying that. I just mean like the complaint the entire time he's been the coach is like recruiting has for the most part been there. It hadn't been number 1 class in the country, but it's been solid. But they haven't they haven't shown up on Saturdays and that he has not been a good sideline coach. That seems to be changing. That seems to be shifting. That seems to be doing well. They seem to be gaining momentum. And it doesn't make any sense to me that now would be the time that you would can him. If they had canned him after Texas A&M, if they had fired him after the Texas A&M game, I would have had no issue with that. And I don't think the University of Florida would have necessarily been wrong in doing so. That would have been the beginning of year 3, and they would have looked like they completely do not belong on the same field as any team with a pulse. I understand if they had fired him after year 2, that maybe would have been a little bit premature, but would have maybe understood it. But now they're finally playing better. It seems like it kind of feels like Shawshank Redemption. You got through all the terribleness, and I know you're going to appreciate that reference. They
Love that
got through
movie.
all the they got through all the they got through all the awfulness. Now it kind of feels like they might be peeking out to the other side. What, you gonna blow
By
the
the
whole
way,
thing up now? Like that doesn't make any sense to me.
no, I agree. Really quick, you want to know how I show prep for Gator Bites and for Hacker After Dark? My wife comes
Yeah.
in. She goes, "Did you guys know Billy Napier is staying? Just wanted to let you know." Yeah, honey, we got that figured out. We're pretty good there, so I appreciate that, sweetie. So she's helping us plan the show, Marsh. She wanted to let us know Billy Napier was staying, so now we
We
have all the
appreciate you, Mr.
information.
Pat.
Yes, exactly. H squared, ladies and gentlemen. No, I completely agree. I mean, there were down times, man. I mean, down times. This season hasn't been flawless. Miami and A&M were awful. You could arguably blame Billy and the staff for the loss to Tennessee. But again, I mean, Graham Mertz is at the half-yard line, fumbles the ball. Is that Billy Napier's fault? Billy Napier's fault was the field goal, right? I'll say that. And maybe not going for 2. But if Graham Mertz scores on that sneak to make it 17-0, who knows what that game is like? So,
And that terrible read jet sweep
yeah, the jet
on
sweep
fourth
was
and one.
awful. Yes, yes.
That was
The
horrendous.
Tennessee, yes. But again, to go in to speak on, man, this team shows a heck of a lot of fight and resolve after a gut wrenching loss in Knoxville. I mean, you want to talk about just a shot to the solar plexus, as the great Gordon Solie used to say, wrestling terminology. They come back a week later and put a 48 spot on Kentucky and beat them by 4 touchdowns. So again, this team has resolve, man. That's why, to me, I have no doubt they're going to compete in the next couple of games. Now, here's the question, all right? Because Scott Strickland's kind of made his bed. So let's say we're wrong in that next or tomorrow against Texas and next week against LSU, it is 41-13 back-to-back weeks. Well, at that point, it's probably a different conversation than you and I are having. This team continues to have to do what they have done, and I believe that they will. If you lose tomorrow 34-17, right, 37-24, I don't think there's much fault in that, particularly with a third string quarterback. If you get boat raced 45-3, that's a problem. Same thing with LSU coming into the swamp on Saturday. So it's interesting timing, back to the whole timing of it, getting out ahead of everything. Maybe it's for recruiting. Maybe they got word Kiffin wasn't interested. I don't know what it is. But you've set yourself up now to where if it looks awful against Texas and LSU, man, that's going to be a really interesting conversation.
And that gets back to what I was saying a little bit earlier about how this statement I think turns a page in the Billy Napier book of being at Florida. I think now you're kind of on the second act of the first act was got to get in here, establish a culture, get some players in, recruit at the high school level, the long game, the slow play. Results might not be there on the field right away, but we're building something. That's chapter 1. We're in chapter 2, which is winning ball games now. And I'm not so much saying the end of this year, especially with maybe Aiden Warner being in the game and whatever, that's going to be kind of junky and jumbled up, I think, for probably the rest of the season outside of Florida State when they go to Tallahassee, which if Lagway's back for a game, it'd be that game. And even if he's not, I think even Aiden Warner beats that Florida State team. That team is horrendous. I mean, you and I could recruit, 22 people in the comments or 20 people in the comments and the two of us to play Florida State and we'd win.
Yeah, quickly on Florida State, because I know you and I got into that a couple of weeks ago. This is my age talking. I grew up in '83 or born in '83, really started following it in '90. I'm 6, 7 years old. All I remember is Florida State, Garnet and Gold, the Spear. They're getting it together at some point. They might have a bad week or two, but at some point Florida State would turn into Florida State. They are awful. That is the worst Florida State team I've ever seen. And you
It's
talk about the end
unbelievable.
of Bowden, which was bad. Willie Taggart, which was bad. I mean, they've had some bad times in Tallahassee. This team is terrible, and it looked like they sort of quit last week against North Carolina. They look very disinterested. So even with Aiden Warner, that's a big game for the Gators because Florida doesn't go to Tallahassee and perform well very often. They need to do that at the end of November because if you lose
Yeah,
to
yeah.
this Florida State team, that's an issue.
They have to win. I mean, heck, they could have you at quarterback. The Gators could, and they got to win that game.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like you could get out there and toss it around a little bit.
Oh, there's no
Um,
question. I could spin it out there. Absolutely.
um, but an Awaken 180's got you in phenomenal shape. You'd be running up and down the field, juking people out. You'd be like Lamar Jackson out there.
Yeah, I've gone from a offensive guard at 317 pounds to a 207-pound QB type body. So no question. 110 pounds down, by the way.
I love it. Congrats, bro. But yeah, I said this yesterday with Dylan. I think, particularly if Lagway can come back, I still don't really know what's going on with his leg. You keep hearing positive reports, but I mean, the man had to be carted off the field.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't play him tomorrow. I don't play him against
I'm a little
LSU.
confused there, but
Yeah.
if Lagway does come back, say he comes back next week and he plays against LSU, without Lagway, this changes a bit, but with Lagway, I believe the expectation still needs to be that they probably need to beat LSU or Ole Miss and pull off one of those games. I mean, you had Georgia to the brink. You should have beaten Tennessee up in Knoxville. Like, I think LSU and Ole Miss at home are easier than those two. Um, and then you got to beat Florida State at the end of the year. I think now the excuses are really gone and really out the window. There's no more blaming Dan Mullen. There's no more not enough time. Like, it's here, and then more of that revolves around next year than this year. But I think to your earlier point, falling on their face again is unacceptable. Looking like A&M and Miami again is unacceptable. They got to look like the team they've looked like the last couple of weeks and be competitive at minimum um, against Texas. And then I think they need to win one of two between LSU and Ole Miss. And I think those are more winnable games than I think we might be maybe thinking. And then Florida State, you obviously no excuses. You got to go beat them, and you got to beat the hell out of them, to be honest.
The Ole Miss game will be interesting. If Georgia beats Ole Miss tomorrow, that basically eliminates Ole Miss from the playoff. And then I'm curious about all those transfer portal guys in Oxford and how interested they'll be in playing the last 2 or 3 games because they're eliminated from playoff contention. So we'll certainly follow that. A couple of things really quick here. Again, the Gator Bytes podcast on 1010XL.com. Thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for bringing it to you. SC-ortho.com is their website. Again, the good Dr. Kevin Murphy joins us periodically throughout the week on 1010XL. And thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for their continued support of the Gator Bytes program, the Northeast Florida's leading orthopedic center. All right, a couple of things when it comes to tomorrow's games. Don't give me a prediction yet. We'll save that for the end because I want to get to a couple of other games. But what type of game are you expecting tomorrow in Austin, assuming it is Aiden Warner, the third string quarterback at the helm?
Say that again, Hack. I apologize. I was getting a text. Sorry. Repeat the
No, you're
last
good.
couple sentences. I
You're
apologize.
good. Imagine Aiden Warner is the quarterback tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? It's not going to be Lagway. Don't give me a prediction yet. We'll save that for the end. But what type of game are you expecting if Aiden Warner is the quarterback?
Um, the one thing I worry about defensively, because they haven't played a lot better. Texas is able to push the ball down the field better than most of the teams they've played lately. Um, People would say Tennessee, but Nico has been wildly inaccurate, and he missed a lot of open throws in that game against the Gators that would have been 40, 50-yard completions. I think Tennessee is going to make you pay for those. Or sorry, Texas is going to make you pay for those if you leave that open. So I'm a little worried about that. I'm a little worried about the downfield passing game getting them a little bit tomorrow. Um, that said, they need to string together at least a few drives that are long, stay on the field for a while, get a couple of touchdowns. Maybe to your point, I'll say like maybe 31-17.
I'll tell you this: now that Billy
You
has
could
the
not even a
assurance,
score. Sorry, I
no,
was
you're good.
explaining and kind of went with it.
Now that Billy has the assurance of coming back in 2025, the boat of confidence, I wouldn't be surprised if you see a fake punt tomorrow, a fake field goal tomorrow, maybe a double reverse pass, a flea flicker. I mean, at this point, with a third string quarterback, you're going to have to think outside the box a little bit. Again, this is assuming Lagway doesn't play, and we don't believe he's going to. I think you are going to see some things a little outside the box, which I'm fine with. Again, it's realistic, man. I do not need on social media tomorrow, if the Gator offense is struggling, for Gator fans to be flipping out. Tell me what school in America going into Texas, Austin to play the Longhorns with a third string quarterback would do anything on offense. It wouldn't happen. So realistic expectations tomorrow. I know I'm gonna get frustrated watching social media. All right, we'll get back to this game at the end. Um, Mario Cristobal's biggest problem at Miami that he's had was last year against Georgia Tech when they did not take the knee and they ran the ball, one of the most idiotic losses I've ever seen in my life. They probably exercise the demons tomorrow. They go to Atlanta to play Georgia Tech. And I would imagine, knowing Cristobal, that he might want to give Georgia Tech the business because of last year. What's your thought?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. If it starts getting ugly in the third, fourth quarter, I'm not sure Mario's going to let up. He's been that kind of coach all year that hasn't wanted to let up. He's wanted to. It's been kind of sort of a revenge tour almost for him this year. It sort of feels like he's got the QB now. They're rolling. That said, there's still some time for Mario Cristobal this thing, and for them to have a devastating loss. They've looked really good at times in games this year. Hack. They've also had no business winning certain games this year. I mean, they should have lost that Cal game 100%. They were down a billion points, and Cal just choked it away. I believe they're going to win that game probably pretty much going away, though. At the point now, they just don't play anybody the rest of the year. They've got such a mojo going. I'm not sure they're going to lose until crunch time later in the year.
Well, three more wins in the regular season. It doesn't matter what happens in the ACC title game; they'll be in. You get to 12-0, and you could lose to Clemson or SMU, and I don't think it's going to matter. You're still going to be in the playoffs. So they're 3 wins away, to me, from clinching a playoff spot. All right, Florida State goes to Notre Dame. Florida State has gone in 11 months from being 13-0 and waiting on their fate for the playoff. Obviously, it didn't work out, to now being a 26-point underdog in South Bend tomorrow, Saturday night, prime time, NBC. That'll be fun. They're going to get crushed tomorrow night, correct? That's all that needs to be said. Just shaking of the head.
Yeah, it's
Why do
over,
I?
dude. It's gonna be this is belt to ass. This is behind the woodshed type of game, dude.
I Notre Dame's going to win the game, and they're going to win the game pretty convincingly. And again, maybe this is just me, and the Florida State football has just been pounded into my skull.
I know what you're about to say, and yeah, it is you.
Do they keep it close in the first half?
No, no,
No, not at all.
no.
Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois earlier this year.
They've also been really good other than that game. That was
Yeah,
the one time they had a bad loss. By the way, Northern Illinois would beat Florida State.
probably. Well, there were a
That's
lot of
how
teams
that's
that
how
would beat
bad
Florida
Florida
State.
State is.
Yeah. Would
Florida
you
State's the
take?
worst. You know that Florida State is the worst team in the Power Four, right?
So you would take Notre Dame in 26?
Yes, yes. Take Notre Dame in 106.
We might
Florida State
talk
is
about that. We might
they
talk
are
about that after the podcast.
they are disgustingly bad, bro.
All right. I
And
agree.
by the
Notre
way,
Dame wins the
if a
game.
single Florida State fan was at they're probably not because it's Gator Bytes. If a single Florida State fan was in the comments right now, they would agree with me.
All right. So I also agree. Miami wins. Notre Dame beats Florida State. Quickly to the SEC. Georgia and Ole Miss. It's a playoff elimination game for Ole Miss. Probably not for Georgia. I think Georgia would still get in at 10-2, although it'd be a little dicey. They need to win tomorrow to not bite their fingernails. And if they lose tomorrow, then they have to beat Tennessee, which is something else to think about. But clearly in Oxford, Ole Miss knows it is a playoff game for them. That should be a lot of fun at 3:30 tomorrow.
Yeah, it is. I also think Georgia. It's weird, man. Georgia. You talk about a Jekyll and Hyde team this year, man. Like Georgia's good, obviously. They go to Texas 2 weeks ago and they look like world beaters.
In the
They
first
look like
half. In the first half.
yeah, but in the first half it kind of decided the game, anyways. But
Yeah.
they they look like an NFL team in the first half against Texas, and then they let Florida with a third string quarterback take them to the brink. They should have lost to Kentucky, who nobody thinks anything of anymore. It's just kind of interesting, man. I think the biggest difference with Georgia this year, and we talked about this a little bit last week, and it reared itself in the cocktail party last week. The biggest difference to me is that they don't have the Bowers or the McConkey that can break a game open for them anymore. So last year they would, in the last couple of years, Georgia would, they'd start to wear down a team a little bit in the first half, run the ball, play defense, get to their quarterback, what have you. And it'd be, a 7-point game, a 3-point game, whatever. And then bam, like Brock Bowers, 50-yard touchdown, or Lad McConkey, and they'd start to break it open. And before you know it, it's halftime and they're up 17 or whatever, and they end up running away with it. That's not happening this year. So teams are hanging around more. Teams are believing more against them in the third quarter, in the fourth quarter. And a team like Ole Miss is genuinely really good. So Ole Miss has a really good defense. Surprisingly, offensively, has been the side of the ball that's been a little more questionable for them this year. But between Walter Nolan and former Gator Princely Umanmielen and the rest of that defense, you look at the way the Gators played last week. I have no reason to believe that Ole Miss's defense can't keep them in check offensively unless Carson Beck shows me something that he hasn't been showing me.
So who
And
wins the
then
game?
Ole Miss,
You think Ole Miss beats them? Wow,
I'm
good
gonna
for
pick them.
you.
I'm gonna pick them in an upset.
How
I
about
just
that?
convinced myself just now.
If Ole Miss hadn't lost to Kentucky at home, I'd think Georgia all day because Ole Miss would be confident. Ole Miss has already lost a home game, and it was a devastating loss on a last-second field goal issue. I think that helps Ole Miss. Are they going to lose two
I
in
do too.
Oxford? That's tough, man. I think it's like six in one hand, half a dozen in the other. I'm very tempted to join you. Um,
You got like I got a buddy who went to Ole Miss. He's a diehard fan, and like for them, like this is like the now or never year. Like they believe in Lane, they like Lane. It's not like Lane's gonna get fired or something, but this is like the year that they're all in and expect something great. Hack is adjusting his camera a little bit. Um, he had to. I think he's about to rejoin us probably here in a second. Um, we're talking about the Ole Miss game. I think Ole Miss ends up winning that game in a shocker, maybe by 3 or 7 or something like that. Who knows? I think we're going to go through the rest of the SEC schedule whenever Hack hops back on. But while he's gone, let's just go ahead and sort of go through some of these. I'll go ahead and go through some of these comments. Chad says, Marsh, yesterday, I don't agree with Billy coming back. Also, Marsh, yesterday, Florida definitely needs to bring Billy back. Ha, wow. I'm kind of on the fence, I have to admit. Hey, Hack, how we doing?
sorry about that. There was a power surge in Mandarin. That was interesting.
All good. I was about to start going through some of the comments, but now that you're back, we'll finish this Ole Miss thoughts. Go ahead and finish what you're saying.
No, I just think, look, Ole Miss, I'm tempted to go with you, but I'm not going to. I just think at the end of the day, Georgia wins by a field goal. I think it's a close game. I think it'll be a fun fourth quarter. But give me the dogs, and I kind of hope I'm wrong because I like Ole Miss. I like Lane Kiffin. I like that team. I just think Georgia, too much talent, finds a way to get it done late. But I do agree it's going to be very, very close.
You're gonna it. That's gonna be a game with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. You're gonna want to have on your television.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. No doubt. All right, 7:30 tomorrow night. This is an elimination game. Alabama, LSU. Both teams have 2 losses. The loser's out. The winner still alive. Baton Rouge will be on fire tomorrow night. That's going to be a heck of a game.
It will be, and Alabama wins.
That plain and simple, huh?
Yep.
They've
I think
struggled
Alabama's
this
better.
year. Okay.
What's up?
They've struggled on the road at Vandy, at Tennessee.
They have. I think this is the week they figured out on the road. They've obviously got to have it, and I know LSU's got to have it too. Um, I just I've seen them. I've liked them in bigger moments this year than LSU. I haven't seen LSU in a whole lot of big moments this year, like big stage stuff. They've kind of, it's weird. Hasn't LSU sort of flown under the radar a little bit this year in a weird way?
Very much. Well, I think they lost that first game to Southern Cal, and people forgot about them.
Yeah, I agree. So maybe I'm wrong there, just because I haven't maybe paid attention to them as much as other teams like Bama. But until I'm proven wrong, I'm taking Bama. I'm taking
I'll
what I
take
know a little bit better.
I'll take Bama too, but that's going to be fun. An elimination game again. Losers out, winners still alive for the playoffs. 7:30 tomorrow night, and then finally to Florida and Texas. I know you said the Longhorns by 2 touchdowns. By the way, I don't know if you know this or not. What was my prediction? The score prediction for Florida Georgia last week? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was on the nose, wasn't it?
34-20. I had Georgia. Yeah, not that I'm
Yeah.
gonna pat myself on the back too much for that.
Well, I had
I don't have the same.
34-21, so I was close.
You were close. You had 34-21. Yeah, so you were close. I don't have the same feel for this game, the same vibe. I think Texas wins, right? I'm not breaking any news there. Give me the Longhorns 37, Florida 17. I think Texas wins. And I think maybe it's 30-17 and Texas adds one late to make it look a little worse than it actually is. But give me Texas 37, Florida 17.
What did I say a second ago? I said 31-17.
Yeah, we're pretty similar again.
Yeah, we're not far off. So I think that'll be probably about right. If the defense gets a couple of turnovers like they did last week, but I don't think Quinn Ewers is going to just hand us the football as much like Carson Beck did. So,
No, I
and again,
agree.
it's the downfield passing game that Florida hadn't really been tested on since the Tennessee game. And again, even the Tennessee game, Nico just missed a lot of open guys. You get beat down the field in this game, Texas is going to make you pay. And I'm a little worried about that. The defense has been playing better, but that has been something this year so far against teams that can actually make them pay for it that they've been susceptible to, and I'm a little worried about that.
Should be a really good Saturday. It begins at high noon, goes all the way almost to midnight. A lot of really good games. We'll be back here next week to recap it all and to preview a pretty good rivalry coming in with LSU coming into the swamp a week from tomorrow. Thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. We always appreciate their support of the Gator Bytes podcast. He is Graham Marsh. I'm the hacker Ryan Green. We'll talk to you next week on 1010XL.com and on the MyBookie digital platform here with 1010XL Podcasts.